And we will move on as soon as I've got my 5th board member here, and the superintendent will be right back in. Hello, Joe. And we will proceed.
Ms. Fareed?
Yes, sir.
May I ask a question?
All right.
So while you were having your non-public meeting, we had a bit of a discussion here, and the group out here would like some changes to the order of the agenda. We think that it would be helpful if the presentations and the material from the board were presented first for CRT, followed by a public comment period on the CRT stuff, and then the material on the reopening were presented, followed by the public comment on the reopening. We think the folks' time here would be best served that way.
So I am going to read something. You may have a seat, Joe.
Thank you.
So per board policy BEDH, and you can look up our policies on our website, which aligns with the RSAs under RSA 92 concerning public meetings of state boards and agencies. That includes the select board, budget committees, school boards, etc. The primary purpose of school board meetings is to conduct the business of the board as it relates to school policies, programs, and operations. Okay? We are not here for any purpose other than to carry out, and I'm shouting not to yell, but just to be heard, okay? Any purpose other than to carry out our mandated legal responsibilities to govern the school district. Public comment is an important and valuable aspect of this style of democracy in New Hampshire, which I love so much, but it is not a required part of the meeting. There are how many of you here? If you all want to speak, or if even half of you want to speak, we will not be able to carry out the work of the school board. This is when we can meet in July. In terms of public comment, we have tried over many years, the board here, the selectmen, everyone, whether it should be at the beginning, at the end, in the middle, split, as Joe mentioned, Mr. Garuba, who spoke. We've arrived at this arrangement across the town, across most of the towns, because your public comment is not necessary to influence the work we're doing at this meeting. Your public comment has to do with your thoughts on the matters on the agenda, but we're not going to be able to change our decisions because you've heard what we've talked about here and now you're commenting in real time. These things take a long time to work out. A policy that you see on our policy, in our policy manual takes months and months to bring to fruition. Okay, our budgets take 8 months of public work in our sessions here, in addition to 4 to 6 months with the budget committee. And that's all within the 1 year before it comes to the warrant, okay? Everything takes time. Our public comment period has been extended to 45 minutes because we assumed a lot of folks were coming given all the comments that we were receiving by email. We've extended it for 45 minutes. I intend to run a very tight ship with the 3-minute limitation on public comment. I'm hoping the 45 minutes will be adequate, but we are not going to move the agenda around because we have a ton of work to do and we're not able to interrupt it in order to have a sort of lively public forum with you, which would be fun, but we don't have time for that. And that is not meant to be an expression of disrespect to anyone's view on any topic. It is just not manageable. Your comments to us following whatever you hear in the meeting, after the public comment period, after our discussions are done, we'll have plenty of time to influence our thinking and our planning. You can email us, you can grab us by the collar at Buckley's anytime, and I am asking you please to email us directly from your own email so that we are able to reach a bona fide individual. And we respond to every individual who emails us directly from their own email. And we respect every single view that comes through, every single view. But we don't have time to turn this into a group discussion. This has to be a meeting about the work we are tasked to do. We're going to hold the agenda as it is with all due respect to all of you and your views on this, and we're going to proceed. The next item on the agenda is agenda adjustments. Does anyone have an agenda adjustment for tonight?
I do not.
The agenda will proceed as
I have
printed.
agenda adjustment.
Yes, sir.
So in June, we discussed about meeting in July, because normally we don't meet in July.
Right.
The item we talked about at that meeting was to discuss changes to and planning around updates around the SAU bathrooms. And we were coming to this meeting in July specifically to talk about that. I would like that in the agenda, and as such, I would like to get that right up front and talked about and dispensed with, because that's why I thought we were meeting here
Agreed.
this month.
Is every sense of the board, you guys good with this? Andy, you are
I can give an
prepared to
update on
speak?
that.
Thank you. So the next, any further agenda adjustments? Correspondence, resignations, nominations.
I wanted to provide an update for the board because it is the summer month and a lot of things changed. So at the end of the school year, between the last time we met, we had some retirements for 6/30/21 were Brenda Golia and Tina Langley. We also had a resignation. Jerry Williams, the Hughes psychologist, and Jen Hannon from grade 1 have notified us. And then we have 2 retirements for June 30th of 22, which is Brenda Nickerson, which is the Hughes librarian, and Lee Walsh, the HPS guidance counselor, have submitted their information. From a hiring standpoint, Alana Cole will be moving from her current Hollis para position, and she'll be becoming a preschool teacher. Lindsay McCool will be a grade 2 teacher, replacing O'Brien, because O'Brien moved into the art position, as you knew. And Lisa Porter, for speech, will be replacing Mrs. Embry. We'll discuss it when we go into the principal's report, but the kindergarten enrollment is up significantly. We're approaching 80 students and expect to probably go beyond that. In both communities, Hollis and Brookline, we're seeing our largest kindergarten numbers probably in the last 10 years. So we will be hiring for that to stay within ed specs, and that's underway.
So that will be a 5th kindergarten teacher, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Question on that?
Sure.
Was that something we anticipated within our budget?
We have some flexibility within the budget, so I think we'll be
Okay.
fine there. What we'll always do is what we've done in the past, we'll go into the operating budget first, and then if for any reason we run into difficulty, we would go to the contingency fund, which was designed just for that specific purpose. But we'll have many months before we need to worry about
Okay.
that.
Do you anticipate needing to go into contingency to cover these hires?
At this point, no.
Okay, thank you.
We'll be still filling the case manager at the HPS. We have an opening for intensive needs at the preschool. We are finishing up our administrative search for Mrs. Tomaselli's position, and probably will have a hire for you when we come back next month. We have a grade 1 opening. One of our staff members has decided to move out of state to be closer to family. So Paula is using the present pool that we already had, and we expect that to be filled. I will share that the job market, there are quite a few openings across the state, and the pool is not increasing rapidly, so it is a lot of work. So I want to thank Paula and Candee for all their efforts, and with the chair's permission, I can jump into the principal's reports if that.
Do you want motions to accept these resignations?
No, you had provided me with the authority,
All right.
so they've all been taken care of. So the next is the approval of minutes.
Andy, may I ask you to repeat something? At the very beginning, you were mentioning 2 resignations. After you mentioned the,
Yep.
who did you say? Can you repeat them again?
Yes, sure. Jerry Williams, which was the Hughes psychologist,
School psychologist, yeah.
and then Jen Hannon, which was grade 1 at HPS.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Approval of minutes? I move to approve the Hollis School Board minutes from June 2nd, 2021. The following amendments were offered. Page 4, line 6, delete the at the end of the line. Page 4, line 45, delete the work of.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? All opposed?
I also move to approve the Hollis School Board public hearing, June 2nd, 2021, with the following amendment offered. Page 3, line 21, correct the spelling of request.
Second. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Thank you. All right, those are the minutes. Andy, you said you had something else?
No, I was just going to add Rob's piece about the bathrooms. That I would put
Well, that will be under our discussions, right?
Mhm.
So in addition to the approval of the minutes, we had wanted to make a motion concerning,
I've spoken to that individual.
okay, fine, we're good.
and it is
Thank you.
set.
Off we go.
We'll do
Approval of
that.
minutes, we're done. So
We'll take care of that.
the much-beloved public input. Folks, I want to hear every word you have to say. Everyone in here at this table wants to hear what everyone has to say. We respect every view, but look how many of you there are. 3 minutes person. Please be respectful of the time. The rules are, do not name employees. These are the rules of the law, not just my opinion. If you have a problem with an employee who is the superintendent, you may say so at the microphone. Otherwise, we have processes, which we will talk about later, processes for people who have concerns or complaints about employees. It is unacceptable to speak an individual's name or an identifying position at the public microphone in this setting. Those are hard and fast rules, okay? Please be respectful, and it's first come, first served. So by all means, step up.
Joe Garuba, 28 Winchester Drive. One thing I was thinking about, I attend all the planning board meetings. I have to go to one following this meeting. But at the planning board meetings, when there is a limitation in time to cover the projects that are proposed for development in the town, the planning board volunteers come in and they hold a second and a third meeting if they need to get those development items reviewed. So the concept that we have a room full of people who have important things to say and you just don't have time to hear them, I don't know that that's actually a valid point, right? You guys can hold another meeting tomorrow if you want to. So that's what I have to say about not allowing everybody to speak. So I'm just going to go into my comments.
I'm going to have to interrupt you. We are not preventing anyone from speaking.
So if we only have 45 minutes and each person gets 3 minutes, that would mean that only 15 people speak, and I'm fairly certain there's way more than 15 people there.
3 minutes maximum. I will not accept the assertion that the board is preventing anyone from speaking.
Okay, if people are online
Joe,
here,
please continue your
when
thinking on this
the
subject. Thank you.
public input section ends, then we would presume that they might want to speak. So the DEI resolution includes valuable concepts like equality of opportunity and the importance of non-discrimination. However, there are very significant problems that I see with the language that came out of that committee. The first one, the document seeks to promote group identity rather than individual responsibility and achievement. This focus on group identity rather than the student distorts the concept of justice. All students should receive equal access to the educational benefits of a Hollis education, regardless of their group associations. Placing significance on group identity only serves to foster division in our community. I want students to be taught to value themselves and their unique abilities and talents, not to focus on race or other traits. Therefore, in the definition of diversity, I recommend striking the words, specifically, while group identity is important. And I have the language, I'll pass it into you. The second problem I see with that document is it seeks to allocate educational resources based on need, with no concern that each student reach his or her full potential. Educational resources must be distributed equally to all students so that each child reaches their full potential. This thinking is behind decisions to eliminate AP programs, as has been done in other districts who adopted these concepts. The goal of our schools should be to see that resources are distributed fairly to all students rather than directing resources only to those students who are part of a specific identity group. Therefore, I recommend changing the definition of the equity term from provides fairness in resources and opportunities so that all individual students get what they need, striking the words "get what they need," and replacing those with to have the opportunities to reach their full potential. And lastly, the third thing that I have a problem with the DEI language is that it's not appropriate for Hollis Brookline to redefine the word equity in a different way from common usage. Equity, as defined by the National Association of Colleges and Employers, includes the concept of adjusting fairness to overcome bias of systemic structures. Equality of opportunity is what we as a public school must strive to achieve. The imperative is to provide access and opportunity, not to allocate resources based on group outcomes. Our unique definition of equity confuses the message of the document and will cause confusions throughout the schools due to the common usage of that word. Therefore, I recommend we replace equity with equality of opportunity throughout the document. And I'll pass up those changes later. I think that's my 3 minutes.
Thank you, Joe.
I'll
That's
be back later.
very helpful.
Andy, were you going to say something?
I was just to say, Joe, if you want to email them to me,
I'm doing it too, but I wasn't.
awesome. Thank you, Joe.
But also, yeah.
Ready?
By the way, I've neglected to point out, please say your name and street address clearly for the record. That's required by law also.
I'm Katie Canane, South Merrimack Road in Hollis. I've been a civil rights advocate for since January 20th, 2017. But before that, I was an HBHS graduate. I was taught by one of the district's many empowering teachers to stand up for what is right, and like many of the people in our community, I came back to Hollis because of the schools. Over the past decade, board members and administrators like yourselves have had to perform regular duties while combating a small group of extremists who want to privatize public education or simply remove all government. I am here today because I think that this is, in addition to the COVID-19 pandemic, has resulted in a level of immobilization that must not be allowed to continue. I understand that the fear of constant litigation is substantial, especially given the recent Superior Court decision in Hubert versus Hollis School District. However, I think it's time to stop coddling these extremists, and we need to put a stop to making decisions based on fear and disinformation, and I think we should start with issues addressed in my statement that will be made public in a couple days. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
John Garuba, 30 Meadow Drive. I'd just like to point out that last time I came to speak in June, I wasn't able to complete what I would like to say, and the group here are in positions of public trust, and in this instance, we're in very extraordinary circumstances, and the decisions that you're making in both policies for reopening and diversity, equity, inclusion are very important to a very many people, and I don't see how you can effectively be making the best decision for the group of people if we don't have a chance to hear everybody's statement. So if there is more people to speak, I respectfully ask that you schedule time before the next meeting to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. So I'd like to express my concern over the proposed DEI resolution. I see several areas of concern. The policy specifically describes grouping of children by identity by acknowledging that group attributes are important. I feel this is unwise as it will result in students and teachers ascribing stereotype characteristics to these arbitrary groups that are identified. We should have a policy that recognizes each student as an individual. The use of identity groups is divisive and will result in discriminatory impacts to children. This is mentally unhealthy for all students, regardless of which groups they might identify with. Second, the policy also includes a picture. Although pictures convey meanings quickly and concepts quickly, they are very imprecise. Something as important as this type of policy deserves more. I'm concerned that leaving pictures and graphics in will leave the policy open for all kinds of different interpretations in the future, causing just difficulty following it and implementing it. For these reasons and many others I don't have time to describe within 3 minutes, I recommend holding off on a DEI policy until more public input can be evaluated.
John, by all means, send any comments you have further to us, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is arnothbelt, and I live on Van Dyke Road. Okay. As I read the materials for this meeting, and much else over the past year, it seems that education is morphing into social psychology. Rarely is there reference to academics. Under general information for today's discussion, under the continuing services headline, on the 5th page out of 7, learning is mentioned twice. RTI, the response to instruction model, will continue to identify learning gaps, provide targeted intervention, and monitor ongoing student progress. The rest of that paragraph concerns social, emotional, and behavioral needs of the students. In the second paragraph, we learn that SAU 41 has committed resources to, quote, assist in identifying potential learning loss and gaps in student content knowledge. Kind of funny to think that that's a continuing service. It would strike me as being a heart of education. Then on to the emphasis, where the emphasis will be reducing learning gaps, providing learning supports for vulnerable populations. Then on to providing staff training to emphasize student well-being and encouraging programs that prove to be effective for achievement gains, including non-traditional opportunities. Well, non-traditional seems to be ruling the day now. 2 references to learning and knowledge content. Pages of returning to school protocols and social and emotional well-being. The program Choose Love will continue, and additional resources are being explored to support the social and emotional well-being of students and staff. For example, classroom observations have been reduced, as has their scope. Staff appreciation opportunities will increase, and the administration will be reading Putting Teachers First by Brad Johnson. All good. Teaching is hard work. I did it for 25 years. But so is being a kid. Presumably, teachers choose to teach information and knowledge to encourage, train, and hone skills. Programs like Choose Love have their place, but education today seems to assume weakness instead of finding and building strength. How about Choose Success? Let parents nurture their children. Thank you.
Ms. Blovell?
Yes.
May I just correct a misunderstanding on your part on one issue? You pointed out the continuing service. That's a technical term that the state utilizes to describe certain subset of students.
It may well be, ma'am.
Yeah, I just wanted to explain
But
it
it
to you.
struck me as being somewhat ironic.
I'm not asking you
Use
to
of
change your
language.
opinion, I just wanted to clarify
That's
what
all.
that term is, that's all. Sorry.
Hi. My name is DanielleDunnitz. I live at 23 Cummings Lane. Can you
I'm
hear?
so sorry, you're not on a microphone. The microphone feeds the live stream. It does
Okay.
not feed a PA system. I'm terribly sorry, which is why I'm shouting.
That's okay. All right. My name is DanielleDunnitz. I live at 23 Cummings Lane in Hollis. I'm a pediatrician. 2 of my children attend Hollis Primary School.
Hi, my name is Amit Kumar. I'm an allergist immunologist. I practice in Nashua, New Hampshire. My practice address is 19 Tyler Street, Suite 101.
Okay. So Dear esteemed school board members, we are writing to express our concern regarding the discussion of discontinuing masking and of reducing COVID-19 precautions in Hollis Brookline schools. The SARS-CoV-2 virus and associated COVID-19 disease continues to upend our lives. We realize the Centers for Disease Control has removed masking recommendations for vaccinated individuals. However, we do not believe this change pertains to our schools, as many of our children are not yet eligible for the COVID-19 vaccine. The CDC is very clear that masking for unvaccinated individuals should continue. In addition, the American Academy of Pediatrics has not changed the recommendations for masking in schools. The AAP strongly recommends the universal use of face masks in schools for adults and for all children older than 2 years. It is therefore imperative masking continues in schools, since most of the students in the elementary school and middle school age groups are not yet eligible for the vaccine, and teenagers are just now being offered the vaccine. Additionally, given the waning enthusiasm over vaccination, ongoing significant vaccine hesitancy, poor vaccine utilization, increasing levels of community spread, and the appearance of variants that may have more significant implications for our children, it is too soon to ease masking mandates in schools. Discontinuation of masking in schools at this point shows willful disregard of expert medical and public health opinion. Of note, the CDC recently adjusted their guidelines to recommend that children who are wearing masks around other children wearing masks do not need to quarantine even if they are close contacts. This change will be beneficial, helping keep our children in school without hybrid learning or long quarantines if masks are mandatory. We cannot ignore or downplay the impact of COVID-19 disease in children. While the prevalence of pediatric illness is less common and disease severity isn't generally as significant as that observed in adults, we are continuing to see morbidity and mortality in children from COVID-19 and from the associated multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, also known as MIS-C, including many children with COVID long haul syndrome with prolonged symptoms of disease, possibly up to 30% of previously infected children having this. We also have not yet identified long-term effects of SARS-CoV-2 infection, even without severe symptomology. Importantly, the emergence of new variants, which are now the most common strains of the disease in the United States, are affecting children more broadly, and we have yet to fully understand the implication of new changes in the virus. Across the country, our colleagues are seeing patients with COVID-19 disease that are younger and healthier at baseline. There is no doubt within the scientific community that masks curb the spread of SARS-CoV-2. Epidemiologic investigations continue to support masks. Studies show that in communities where masking mandates were enacted, there was linear decrease in number of cases, with the greatest decreases in communities with the longest mandates. In outbreaks, including household clusters, masks protected against transmission. In addition, even in instances where transmission occurs, masking reduces viral inoculum, which appears to decrease severity of disease. Furthermore, we know that relying on symptoms alone is not a reasonable intervention to mitigate disease. This year has shown that asymptomatic transmission does continue to play a role in community spread.
Dr. Dunnitz, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I have to stick to my time.
Okay.
I apologize, but I believe you've submitted that, right?
Yes.
Dr. Kumar.
Dr. Kumar.
Yeah, so I'm just going to continue
2
then,
seconds, please.
and
My
I'll take
problem-
my 3 minutes.
for non-residents? Because
That's what I was going to, Joe, I cannot allow a non-Hollis resident without a vote from the board to speak to the board.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
taxpayer issue. If there were no other speakers here, I'd consider asking the board to let you speak. If you would like to stay until the end of the meeting, and if, not the end of the meeting, the end of the public comment period, and see if there's time left, but I'm terribly sorry.
Oh, that's fine.
I beg your pardon.
Okay, no problem.
But thank you so much for coming.
Yep, sure.
Hollis residents, who's next? Thank you.
Where were you at, sir? I'll finish reading it for you.
Excuse me, I was waiting in line.
That's fine. How about, ma'am, if you don't mind, just wait your turn, that's all. Go ahead, thank you. Your name, sir?
Hello, my name is Mike Ramundi. I live on Olson Drive in Hollis.
Yes.
And before I begin, I'd like to speak to the DEI initiative. I'd like to address some of the points that were just made.
Okay.
Over the past year, we heard about COVID being a virus that could be spread through droplets and on surfaces. However, that's been upended. We now know with certainty that it's an airborne disease, which means the masks that 99% of people are wearing are completely ineffective. Those are only for droplets, for droplet precautions. You need an N95 mask in order to protect against airborne diseases. And by the way, airborne means social distancing is rendered useless because it's not direct contact. It gets up in the air, floats around the room. 5 minutes later, you can get it. So I encourage you to look into the science. I'm not a scientist or medical person, but my wife is, and she works in the hospital on the front lines, and she sees this stuff day in and day out and is well in tune with what's going on. Getting to the D&I initiative, I have a generally positive view of the document. I am an opponent of CRT being taught in our schools, and I can see where a clear effort is made to address my concerns. I do, however, think there are few opportunities for improvement. In the diversity section, there's a sentence which states, while group identity is important, we affirm the centrality of the individual student who is ultimately responsible for his or her own thoughts and actions. While this statement is true, I'm concerned it may be used as a basis to conduct discussions about group dynamics by a teacher who is not a member of a particular group and may not know what they think they know about that group. For instance, my family has Native American Indian heritage. I really don't want my children to have to deal with the teacher clumsily stumbling through the different concerns that my child should have. I feel like that's best left to me as a parent. And I think this lies outside the competency of the school system, and I would request that the reference to group identity be removed. I don't think it really serves much of a purpose. Under the inclusion section, there's a statement, we know that by creating a vibrant climate of inclusiveness, we can more effectively leverage the resources of diversity to advance our collective capabilities. I would request a change of this language to, quote, both our individual and collective capabilities. Finally, while the document seems agreeable, I'm very cautious as to how it will be interpreted and enforced. My reasoning being that there appears to exist a lot of dishonesty and deception taking place with respect to CRT. Many in the education system throughout the country have been feigning ignorance of CRT and stating that they don't understand the concerns of its opponents since it's not actually being taught. These assertions, however, are undermined by the various teachers' unions themselves. For instance, at its 2021 annual meeting, the National Education Association, the union which I believe our teachers belong to, please correct me if I'm wrong, declared under business item number 39, quote, we oppose attempts to ban critical race theory and or the 1619 project, unquote. I would like to know how the school board will ensure that teachers follow their directives and not the teachers' unions. Thank you.
Name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Kelly Piche, 59 Deacon Lane. I would just like to continue reading the letter that was not able to be finished. So these are not my words. They are from a list of physicians in the area. Finally, concerns regarding safety of long-term mask wearing have not been supported by anyone. Masking is a simple, safe, cheap intervention that saves lives. It seems unfathomable to stop an intervention with this profile at this stage in the pandemic. Furthermore, making masks optional in schools is not a viable option. This will undoubtedly create in-groups and out-groups based likely on parent household preferences and will create greater opportunities for bullying in our schools. Additionally, children who do not mask put other children at risk for illness and for quarantine. Finally, stopping masking at this time will pose additional risks to teachers and their families, especially those who are high risk, potentially cannot be vaccinated, have poor response to the vaccine giving underlying conditions, or live with unvaccinated individuals. It is our duty as a community to protect our most vulnerable every step of the way during this pandemic. Sending any of our children to school without masks seems like blatant disregard for life, health, and science. To comment on a few myths that have been perpetrated, one, if there were going to be transmission, we would have seen it by now, with kids spending time together playing sports and in dugouts. COVID has not been shown to be transmitted easily, if at all, outdoors. COVID is transmitted very well indoors when people are not masked, as shown by many outbreaks when people gather indoors, such as in school and at camp bunks and cafeterias. Two, it should be a parent's choice whether the child wears a mask or not. Unfortunately, our children wearing masks doesn't protect them from COVID if others around them aren't wearing masks. Until a vaccine is available for our students, universal masking of unvaccinated people is key to protect our children. 3, children will have to quarantine even if they're wearing masks and are close contact. This is no longer the current recommendation. The CDC guidance adds the following exception to the definition of close contact. In the K-12 indoor classroom setting, the close contact definition excludes students who are within 3 to 6 feet of an infected student, laboratory confirmed or a clinically compatible illness, where both students were engaged in consistent and correct use of well-fitting face masks and other K-12 school prevention strategies, such as universal and correct mask use, physical distancing, increased ventilation, were in place in the K-12 school setting. Our recommendations as physicians are as follows. 1, continue masking mandate in schools at this time. 2, determine a transmission threshold under which it might be safe to discontinue masking mandates once children are able to be vaccinated. 3, provide ongoing education and encouragement to families in regard to the ongoing need for community mitigation strategies and vaccination. 4, if unwilling to follow the CDC and AAP guidelines, please consider separate cohorts/classrooms of masked children and unmasked children. Socialization, physical activity, and education are not trivial needs. In fact, they are essential to the well-being of children, families, and communities. For these reasons, we believe schools need to continue strong safety and sanitation measures such as universal masking. To reiterate, based on the science and data at hand, it is too soon to discontinue masking in schools. This recent quotation is concerning and is one of the reasons we feel so strongly about this issue.
Ms. Piche, I'm terribly sorry. I have to be strict. Are you very close to finishing?
There's like that much left? I don't know, an inch?
I'd like you to skip to the signatures and be done, if you don't mind, please.
All right, I apologize in advance, and I'm not going to get these names right. With gratitude, DanielleDunnitz. Also Gary Duntz, urologist. Susan Fanberg, pediatrician. Lydia Garcia, obstetrician gynecologist.
Just the names, please, quickly.
Oh, gotcha. Ewa Jankowski, Amit Kumar, Lawrence Lerner, Stephen LeBlanc, Susan LeBlanc, Lila Monahan, Marie Ramos, Darla Thing, John Thing, and Rita Yule.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, I asked her to read the list because most of those names are Hollis residents. Next speaker, please. Sir, is that you? Great.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am John Furlins of 88 Dow Road, Hollis. I am not only a parent, I'm also a grandparent of 3 primary age young boys. And I'd like to first of all say that what I'd like to see for those boys, for their future, I'm sorry, did you? Okay. Anyway, I think we as parents, we all want basically the same thing for our kids. We want them to be, grow up to be, happy, successful, the adults, successful at whatever they choose to do, and the essential knowledge building blocks really start right here at the primary school with the policies that you folks put into place. Now, in looking at the DEI initiative and related the materials, there is an awful lot there that could, with all its offshoots, that could really fill up a heavy-duty agenda. The concern I have is that subjects like literacy and math are essential building blocks, towards our kids' success. And it's right now even a full court effort on us parents, to get kids to focus, to do their homework, to listen in class. And everything that's coming down now with the DEI initiative as it's incorporated into the syllabus of these kids is going to detract from what they really have to know to prepare them for adulthood. We don't want to see kids shortchanged in their math classes to be marched off to attend social justice boot camp. Now, what are they going to be learning there? If we look at what DEI teaches and what critical race theories teaches, it does appear that critical race theory, those basic tenets have really made their way into the DEI. And so what are we going to be forcing upon these kids? We're going to be telling them that because they are born white, that they have an unfair advantage, that there's white privilege that they're, born into, that they are oppressors, and these folks of a different color are the oppressed. And we don't really want to inculcate our young kids with shame and guilt at this kind of an early age. We're already seeing some incidents that have been reported. If you look at abouthollis.com, there are some incidents reported in there that we are already experiencing bullying and intimidation in our school system. We really don't want that to continue. The thing that is really, really toxic is this idea of groups, the group identity. The group identity is something that forces the kids into looking at themselves and feeling guilt and feeling different from another group, differences that didn't exist before in the way that they perceive each other. So it really promotes divisiveness. Our kids have been beaten up pretty badly with this whole COVID thing, and I really don't believe it's in the best interests of our educational system that we now hammer these kids with divisive ideas that are at the foundation of CRT, which I think are being now called DEI. It's a much more innocuous kind of a term than CRT. But identity politics has made its way in there, and that's what we're coping with. So these teachings that are being forced upon our kids, because of the take away from the skills that our kids really need in order to develop their own education, and the toxic effect that it has on their psyche, the divisiveness that it is creating, I would urge you folks that are making policy to keep these issues in mind, and especially the group identity. I think we want to teach kids to be individuals, to be able to try to excel, not be held back because somebody of a different color is not able to, academically compete. I think those folks that can't compete, surely they need a whole lot of help that has to be, directed toward the individual. But those kids that are able to advance, they should be able to go through to AP classes, maximize their potential, and be able to feel comfortable about themselves in pursuing that.
I'm terribly sorry to interrupt. I really appreciate comment. I've got to keep to the 3 minutes because of the line.
I am all set.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for listening.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much. Sir?
Clarity on some of the topics we're talking about tonight. So I'm not aware, and I believe I can, based on our conversations around DEI came to this board, and I believe this is only the second or third time we've kind of looked at some of the verbiage around the committee's work. I'm not aware that any of this work is going to translate in any curriculum changes whatsoever, number one. Number two is that curriculum is owned by this board. It's not owned by our teachers union or anything else. We are the sole owner of the curriculum, its direction, and we convey that direction to our administration. They carry out the goals and expectation of this board. DEI is not transcending down into curriculum as far as I know, this member knows. And so I just want to make that clear, because I'm hearing things about curriculum and DEI going down into curriculum, which concerns me. I'm also hearing about some other aspects around that this is policy. DEI came to us as a resolution, which is not policy. It's not going to extend into policy as far as I know.
We don't, I'd like to not eat into the public comment time, but your points are well made. Thank you so much, Rob. We'll add his time to yours, but thank you very much, Rob. That's very well, much appreciated. Your name, please, sir.
My name's Eric Morin, 18 Jambard Road, Hollis. During the first wave of the COVID-19 virus back in March 2020, when most schools here and throughout Europe closed, Sweden was the one exception where they kept schools and daycares open from ages 1 to 15, accounting for 1.8 million children. They had no mask wearing or social distancing as well. Despite the lack of these restrictions, none of these children died from the virus. According to Harvard medical professor and epidemiologist Martin Kulldorff, COVID is primarily spread through adults, and it is highly unusual for a child to transmit it from child to an adult. Kulldorff also stated that the risk of infection for teachers is the same or slightly lower than the average in other professions, and that is, this is a quote, "No purpose of wearing masks either for the benefit of the children or for the benefit of the teachers. There is no public health reason to do that," end of quote. According to Martha Chrysler, a clinical scientist with experience in microbiology, there was ample evidence to suggest adverse effects from children wearing masks. According to a study in April, 68% of more than 25,000 participants had problems wearing face coverings, and the content of carbon dioxide inhaled by them was several times higher than the acceptable norm, Chrysler testified. Due to the high intake of carbon dioxide, children experienced symptoms such as irritability, headaches, difficulty in concentrating, reluctance to go to school, impaired learning, drowsiness, and fatigue. She also explained that the issue of mask wearing, especially for children, is more critical as it makes a child more vulnerable than an adult to injury from oxygen deprivation and high intake of carbon monoxide. Microbes also concentrate on the outside of the masks, causing bacteria. My son has developed rashes on his face and had to be placed on antibiotics due to this. My other son, during allergy season, was kept out of school for a number of days because he couldn't breathe, simply because of his congestion, and on top of that, wearing the mask. Masks are also damaging our children physiologically and developmentally. They are missing social and emotional cues, simple smiles, cues in which children learn by. I have seen children panic and cry simply for forgetting a mask. This is no longer about public safety. This is now about control and virtue signaling. We know children are not the spreaders of the virus, and that much of this is now just simply theater. The physical, physiological, and developmental damage that this has caused and continues to cause our children is reprehensible and can be avoided going forward. End the fear-mongering over this virus that has little to no effect on their health. All members of faculty and staff in the schools that chose to be vaccinated have been vaccinated. It's time to move on. Forcing kids to wear masks at this point, in my opinion, is child abuse, as studies have shown masks do little to curb the spread with children. However, if the parents want their child to wear it, so be it. It's their child, it's their choice. As my children are my choice. Keep it optional, but never mandatory. This is supposed to be the state, live free or die, not live unfree and hide. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for the privilege of allowing me to speak. I'm Mark Constantin. I live at 99 Twist Lane. I have been a plastic and reconstructive surgeon in this region for 43 years. I came when I was the only private practice plastic surgeon in the state in 1978. In that time, I have written some 100 papers, 3 textbooks, book chapters, done a great deal of basic science and clinical research. I have never been able to guarantee a patient equity. It's not possible. In other words, I can't give the same outcome to patient A and to patient B because they're different people, no matter how hard I try. So the equity, diversity, inclusion issue concerns me, and it involves a lot of our surgical societies too. We've had those discussions there. So what I would like to know, to comfort me, is to have you show me outcome studies, 5-year outcome studies, where diversity, equity, inclusion was done in school systems with similar demographics, and show that it improved the happiness of the children, the patriotism, the cohesiveness, the things we all want from our children. If there is no such thing, that makes it an experiment. Now that by nature isn't bad, but in that case, what we need to do here is to measure certain parameters at the beginning of school, all the things you hope to include with this new philosophy. and then measure them again at a discrete, agreed-upon time, like 6 months, and see if what you hope to achieve has been achieved. In that case, I'm happy to listen to it. But I think without knowing what the outcome is going to be for our children, we're performing an experiment for which the outcome may not be what we want. All our boys went to the Hollis schools. I have 2 grandchildren in the Hollis Elementary School now, and so it's a critical issue for me. I thank you for the ability to talk.
Thank you very much. Next person.
Hello, Board. My name is Maria Hubert, and I live at 68 Hideaway. On June 30th, there was a study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association titled "The Experimental Assessment of Carbon Dioxide Content in Inhaled Air with or Without Face Masks in Healthy Children." 2 weeks later, that study was retracted. And a number of doctors all over the country were sharing that information. It was good news, and it gained a lot of traction. And that's when they decided that was the end of that. They're going to retract it. I just wanted to read to you a letter by the doctor who published that study. This is the author of Retracted Children's Mask Study Responds to Trial Site News. Trial Site News gives information on trials, medical trials. It was by Dr. Ron Brown. Yesterday, July 19th, 2021, Trial Site News reported that a study of carbon dioxide in children's masks were retracted by the editor of JAMA Pediatrics. JAMA Pediatric editors retract children's mask study. After requesting a statement from the corresponding author of the retracted study, Dr. Harold Wallach, I received the following response from him from his German web address this morning. This is his response. Well, we published our response to the queries of the editorial office on Retraction Watch. This is the material we sent to the journal. I'm not going to include that. The journal did neither respond to that except by saying our response was inadequate, without particularly telling us what was inadequate. The journal said it had done an additional review. My request sent yesterday morning, my time, i.e. morning U.S. business time, had not been answered until yesterday business closing time. I do not see that any of the comments of the journal has either invalidated our results, nor have we left out any of the queries unanswered. In the meantime, we have received several comments by atmospheric and chemical scientists who have measured the same amount of carbon dioxide under face masks as we did. My conclusion is this retraction is political. This is the doctor, not me speaking. My conclusion is this retraction is political, as the retraction statement says, because of public health implication. In our view, the public health implications would be that the wearing of face masks by children is carefully scrutinized, and anybody who does not agree with our data should produce better data refuting our findings. This is the normal way of scientific discourse. Censorship because of data that, as one commentator put it, are unhelpful or not wanted, is not the way of science, but the way of autocratic societies. And back in June, the World Health Organization did the same thing. They published a study showing that that asymptomatic spread was very rare. Basically, they wanted to say never, but just to be rigorous, they said very rare. And that was retracted also because it didn't fit the political agenda. And this really needs to stop, and people need to do their own research and understand what's going on here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Andrew Scott, Proctor Hill Road. Mr. Maine, before I did my comments before I heard your comment there, and I want to thank you for clarifying how the school board has a responsibility for the curriculum. I do believe that you all will make the right decision as far as this curriculum is concerned. However, implementing that curriculum is the responsibility of the administration. There are some incidences that have been reported where critical race theory or critical theory type processes have been inserted into classrooms as a part of choices that have been made. And so that would be something that I would ask, how are you monitoring that? An example is on the AboutHollis.com website, a father reported hearing that white people are the only ones who can be racist, and white people cause racism. Now, that was in the primary school that happened. That father has identified himself, I believe, to you, and I know to Mr. Corey. And so that's not some made-up thing. That happened despite the fact that the curriculum has been set by this board. So that is just in response to something that was just said. The comments that I would like to talk about, a year ago, I spoke at this meeting and talked a little bit about definitions of terms like diversity, equity, inclusion, racism, anti-racism. I sent this board and Mr. Corey a follow-up note with the definitions, and also Mr. Corey asked me to be a part of the DEI committee. One of the things that for critical race theory, because there seems to be a lot of definitions within society these days on exactly what it is, but if you quote from Richard Delgado, who anyone within the field knows that he is one of the primary beginners or people who really defines what critical race theory is, but he wrote in his book, Critical Race Theory, 3rd edition, page 3, that unlike traditional civil rights discourse, which stresses incrementalism and step-by-step progress, critical race theory questions the very foundations of the liberal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, enlightenment, rationalism, and neutral principles of constitutional law. Now that is straight from one of the key sources on CRT. I highlighted the text because this theory, it's playing a major role in our current cultural moment. It seeks not just racial justice, but to undo legal reasoning, the use of logic, reason, and debate to move society forward, i.e. Enlightenment, rationalism. It does not believe in incremental change and improvement. It seeks to disrupt, dismantle, and tear down the institutions that have made this country the great nation it is, despite its imperfections and continued need to improve. It is easy to tear down. It is not so easy to build. Critical race theory uses a poor research paradigm as a foundational principle. It's designed to separate people into different groups of oppressors and oppressed and create conflict between those groups. The solutions given by CRT proponents involve discriminating against people now and in the future for past wrongs, which will only create more conflict and strife going forward. One of the modern-day scholars who has popularized CRT is Professor Candee, author of several best-selling books, including How to Be an Anti-Racist. I read this book last summer. I encourage those that are interested in this discussion to read it as well. Here are some of his more notable quotes. The opposite of racist isn't not racist. It is anti-racist. What's the difference? One endorses the idea of racial hierarchy as a racist or racial equality as an anti-racist. One either believes problems are rooted in groups of people as a racist or locates the roots of problems in power and policies as an anti-racist. One either allows racial inequities as to persevere as a racist or confronts racial inequities as an anti-racist. There is no in-between safe space of not racist. Under Mr. Candee's definition, the identification of racism against non-white people in any situation is always possible and rarely, if ever, falsifiable because it does not have to be intentional or conscious. For example, this is just an example. A black customer and a white customer enter a store at the same time. The white sales assistant approaches the white customer to offer help first, and this could be identified as racism because it prioritizes the white person's need. However, if the sales assistant approached the black customer first, this could also be identified as racism because it could be read as indicating a distrust of black people or unwillingness to have them in the store. The shop assistant's perception of her own motivations are irrelevant, and to be a conscious anti-racist, she would need to admit her racism and pledge to do better. This is important because another famous Ibn Candee quote is, "Denial is the heartbeat of racism." If you deny you are a racist, then you are a racist. This goes to our anti-bias, anti-racist teacher training that's going on 2 times a month in the primary school. This creates a divisive and hostile workplace environment. If these definitions are being used, and I do believe they are, undergirding that type of training and professional development, then you're creating a very difficult situation where people can't say that they don't agree with something without being called a racist. Another famous Ibram Kendi quote, "The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination." He outlined his long-term solution in an article on Politico titled "Pass an Anti-Racist Constitutional Amendment." This amendment states that racial inequity is evidence of racist policy. The solution would be to make inequity in outcomes unconstitutional. A Department of Anti-Racism, or DOA, DOA, would be created, unaccountable to voters, who would have the power to pre-clear all local, state, federal policies based on his definition of anti-racism and equity. Right? This is a direct quote from his article. He says, "The Department of Anti-Racism would monitor policies, investigate private racist policies when racial inequity surfaces, and monitor public officials for expressions of racist ideas. The DOA would be empowered with disciplinary tools to wield over and against policymakers and public officials who do not voluntarily change their racist policies and idea." Again, that's under his definition of racism. So it's not really a theory, it's an unfalsifiable assertion of racial essentialism that stigmatizes white people and irredeemably racist and privileged, and black people as systemically repressed. And so I caution professional development that has this principle undergirding what it is that we are teaching our teachers, because ultimately professional development will end up in the classroom regardless
Andrew,
of what.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Thank you for your statement.
Thank you.
Wait.
Yes.
You made a statement about the middle of it, or near the end, actually, where you asserted that you believe the material you quoted, those books and that whole background, is embedded in a twice a week.
Twice monthly.
Twice a month?
Yeah. It's an A-bar training that is going on in the Hollis Primary School.
How did you draw this conclusion?
I'm on the DEI committee. Superintendent Corey indicated that this type of training in our November 5th, I believe, meeting of 2020 indicated this type of training was going on. He had heard some positive things about it. I reached out to the teacher who was doing it. He said, "Hey, you all should participate and kind of look into it." I reached out. I knew the teacher. She's worked with one of my daughters. I reached out to her, said, "Hey, how you doing? I heard this. I copied Mr. Corey on the communication. I'd love to participate. It's in Zoom. Just kind of listen in." Kind of got ghosted. She said, "Well, let me check." I said, "Well, can I at least see what you just did? Because I heard some positive things on it." That was early November. Eventually learned that it was part of that training was about kind of teaching how to change how to teach about Thanksgiving so that it's, not just a holiday of, Thanksgiving, but, a day of mourning, because of the things that have happened in our country and our history.
Thank you for your points. I'm mindful of these other 10 people or so.
Right. So the teacher never got, I did one other feedback, never heard from her, and then these other things came up. There are teachers within the school, because it is a divisive training. There are teachers that are very uncomfortable that have gone to Paula, that have gone.
Okay, so now you're talking for people who are not you. Thank you very kindly. I truly appreciate your input.
My name is Karen Dodge, and I live at 73 Olson Drive in Hollis. I've also worked in the SAU district for 9 years now. I would like to say that Andrew has done an outstanding job capturing the CRT, the DEI, the ABAR, euphemisms, and I'm going to name the elephant in the room. These are Marxist policies. And nobody wants to come forward and admit that this is what is so insidious about taking our children and re-educating them into believing that they should be classified and that decisions should be made on skin color. First of all, The 1619 project, which is part of the ABR support, is totally fabricated. There is not one citation, there is not one quotation, there is not one reference to research to validate any of this statements that are being made in the 1619 project. This was a series of essays created by Nicole Hannah-Jones, and it cannot be documented or substantiated. What is happening in our schools is that, and I was going to do a whole history of how critical theory morphed into critical race theory and name all the references, but decided that it was more important for people to understand that, one, there is no such thing as systemic racism, and to tell people that because you're white, that you are privileged and that blacks are at the bottom of a hierarchy that has been arbitrarily established. My concern with Hollis is the majority of our minority students are not black. They're Asian, Indian. There are three races. And what has happened with CTR, what has happened with ABAR, what has happened with DEI is all of these categories have been created to create division. The oppressor versus the oppressed, the man versus woman, straight versus homosexual. The list goes on. If you can be put in a category and punished for being in that category, then they have succeeded. The whole intention, and this has been going on since 1940, this is not brand new. The intention was Marx failed miserably in his ideology. He created the paradigm of the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. He assumed that the proletariat, the workers, would rise up and take over the entrepreneurs and the people controlling the government. Didn't happen. It did not happen. What has morphed into CRT is that class division doesn't work. America is the greatest country. It is the most diverse, the most beneficent, and we have a group of individuals who want to diminish this country's history. You just look in the news, taking down statues, BLM protests, that's Marxist. Marxism is alive and well and has been put on, totally reinstated under the guise of, we will teach your children how to understand racism. They won't be racist. Our children are not racists. None of us are racists. The whole notion and the language of white supremacy is a total lie. White people are not responsible for racial disparities. But that is what the kids are being told. It's their fault if their black friend isn't as successful as they are. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Ms. Dodge, I'm terribly sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
You. I've still got 7 people in line.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. Did you say that you work for the SAU?
Yes.
Oh, very well. Thank you.
Yes. Can I just read a quote?
Sure.
This is from Ronald Reagan. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like to live in the United States where men were free.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening. I'm Raul Blanchet from Mendelssohn Drive, Hollis. For background, I was born and raised in Cuba. I've lived under communism. I suffer, when I came to this country, I suffer what the issues of DEI attempt to solve. I lived in Hollis for 36 years. My objective in what I'm about to say is to try to bring some cordiality to the town, bring everybody together and move forward with potential solutions. What I would like to do is, first of all, offer the initiative. I would like to make some comments and changes to it and maybe submit it to you for consideration. One of the things I do at work a lot is write down complete technical reports that mean what they say and say what they mean. And I believe that as written, this initiative is too vague and is creating division within the town. So I don't know what the timeline is, but if maybe I can help move the ball forward, I'd be glad to forward it to you. I follow certain principles in my lifestyle. First of all, the devil is in the details. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Follow the money, and in addition to that, this has become a very special word these days, transparency. If the community is going to trust what's being done, we have to be totally transparent. So I urge you to please consider ways in which we can be more transparent. And we can discuss some potential solutions later. So I had some questions for the committee, for the board. One of them, part of the resolutions talk about a timeline. There's going to be a 5-year plan that's going to be published sometime this year. Number one, I would like to see details on those plans rather than platitudes. Number two, like typical roadmaps in government, when you put together a timeline of actions and recommendations, there's always a cost or a resource associated with it. If you create this plan without resources, it's not going to solve anything. Try to come up, even if it is a wag, a wild-ass guess, try to come up with a level of estimate for what it will take. Because that way, those are the kinds of things that begin to add transparency to the discussion. So what I would like to do is just appreciate if you can accept the draft I'm going to send you with some changes and some comments, and that way maybe we can improve things. It's not a matter of how I feel about the issue. I believe that we can, with the right wording and the right working together, we can move the ball forward, but we need to come up with solutions to help solve this issue. I've lived in Hollis too long, and I hate to see it fall apart instead of coming together. Thank you.
Thank you, Raul.
Hello, Adam Bragg, 98 Wright Road. First, I want to say thank you for serving our community. I'm sure all of you would rather be in your pool right now than be here. You've all done an awesome job getting us through COVID-19 to this point. You could be a model for any school system in the country. As a parent of a first and third grader, there's an upcoming decision that you're making about reopening that really concerns me, and that's the line, parents will be provided with the choice to have their children wear masks during the school day. We all know that COVID-19 is not behind us. The epidemic is not over by any stretch of the imagination. This is especially true for those who are not vaccine eligible, which includes the entire population of this school and the Hollis Primary School as well. Dismissing this basic and proven prevention method of wearing a mask is premature. As recently as July 9th, this is recent data, July 9th, the CDC concluded that schools should continue with their layered prevention strategy, which includes consistent and correct use of masks by people who are not fully vaccinated. If nothing else, I'd ask you to wait to lift the mask mandate until everyone in the elementary school cohort has the opportunity to be vaccinated, perhaps vaccine approval date by the FDA plus 60 days or 90 days, and then you say you don't have to wear masks anymore. Everybody's had the opportunity to be vaccinated at least. I'm a network security engineer as a profession. You can't time a network security outbreak, just like you can't time a virus outbreak in your school or community. Lifting the indoor mask requirement is analogous to turning off the antivirus on your computer or turning off your firewall when you don't think you need it anymore. We have provided a safe place to learn. You have all provided a safe place to learn, be it in the building or remotely, throughout this entire epidemic. COVID-19 still exists in Hollis and the surrounding communities, and new variants such as Delta make the virus even more contagious today than it was a year ago when we had the mask mandate and we thought it was a good idea, which it was. As parents, we need to be able to plan for the upcoming school year. So I hope that you have the reopening plan in place by the August meeting or even before that, with a mask mandate included. So I ask you to keep the mask mandate in place until the children in our schools have the opportunity to be vaccinated against COVID-19. Again, I appreciate all of you for being here and the awesome job that you've done so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you go, I just want to comment on the last thing you said. The planning is being developed continually with input from every proper source. You know, you could ask for Department of Health and Human Services, CDC, et cetera, and we will not be finalizing anything until very, very close to the beginning of school.
Well, I know there's a call tomorrow, right? Hopefully tomorrow.
But their call could change the following week.
But still, like, we need to be able to plan as parents whether we need to do something alternate, like do pod schooling or something like that.
Understood, but I'm just pointing out that the plan won't be fully finalized until it's fully finalized. And
right, and I'm asking that you do it as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name is Jamie Wilder, and I live at 48 Pierce Lane in Hollis. I was born and raised in the town and went through the entire school system from preschool through high school. And I graduated and I came back here, and I am currently raising with my husband our 5 children. I have homeschooled my children up until the first one came in 6th grade. That was my oldest. And he has continued on, except I took him out last year because of the regulations that you were putting in place because of mask mandates and me knowing my children and knowing what children need. You cannot teach a small child anything when you're covering your face because they learn from your expressions and they learn how to speak language through looking at your mouth and seeing the movement that occurs during that time. It is not only bad for them to be breathing in the carbon dioxide that they are taking in when their faces are covered, but if you have ever watched a child and how they deal with their mask, they are not using them properly. The virus spreads by you touching your mouth or touching your face and then touching a surface or touching something else. So if you think by protecting them by covering their face, you're actually probably putting them at a higher risk instead of saying, be uncovered and wash your hands more often, because that's how we kill the germs on your hands. If you don't know, the CDC has said that COVID-19 has a 99.8% survival rate, and that hasn't changed. So I understand that there are people that are immune compromised and have issues. I understand that there are people that want to get their vaccine and they want to vaccinate their child. But that vaccine has been around for less than a year. Every single person that signs up to do that is under an experiment. Just like Mr. Constantin was mentioning that he didn't want to experiment without an outcome, you are doing it on a population, and I do not think it should be mandated for our children, and I don't think you should tell them to cover their faces anymore. Children need to be able to have touch and build relationships and learn how to come together. That's how you teach them to be compassionate and to love, not by telling them through a curriculum that you're talking about possibly adding in over time that tells them that there's division. Because I am telling you right now, I teach my children how to love. And everything that has gone on through all that's come in, it has turned them against each other, and I don't mean a little bit. I can tell you multiple stories from kids that I've had firsthand of how one child has called them a racist or a bigot or a sexist based on their views on political things. So the division can be stopped if people start allowing us to have an opinion and have choices as parents. If he wants to vaccinate and he wants to mask them up, then they can have their choice. But we should not be told as parents what our kids need, because you have not seen, and you will not see for many years, the psychological effect that this past year has had. And I plead with you tonight to reconsider what you're doing to these children in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you.
Harold Cadman, 169 Depot Road, Hollis. Diversity, inclusion, and equity is simply a euphemism for critical race theory. They are one and the same and employ Orwellian doublespeak to actually promote racism, as opposed to combating it as it claims to do. Whatever sins there are in America's past, real or perceived, was part of an evolutionary process that resulted in the largest, most diverse, and prosperous society on earth today. America is the world's greatest melting pot, and America is the world's greatest land of opportunity. Think about that. DIE and CRT are Marxist constructs designed to divide a nation into groups or factions to create an us versus them dynamic in order to demoralize the society, making it easier to conquer. So it is not surprising that considerable funding is being provided to the teachers' unions by the very racist Chinese Communist Party in order to demoralize American children so they readily accept the socialist Marxist ideology when they become adults. The question I have for teachers is, are you going to do the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party and help them destroy America? Or are you, if you are not pushing back on your corrupt union leaders, then you will be complicit in the destruction of your own country.
My name is Jim Gill. I live at the building Milton Place. And the first thing I want to say to all of you is thank you for your service. I don't believe you're earning six figures. I suspect you have families and responsibilities to children and 8 million things going on. Here you are going rigorously through budgets and showing up all on a voluntary basis, and in this maelstrom of a time that we're living in, it's a tough time to serve. But my next thought was, boy, I wish Washington operated this effectively, as this town is right now, right? People are sharing their views. There aren't too many countries that enjoy a democracy, right? And here we are able to share what we really think. People listen and they care and so forth. Why I'm here is I was driving through Sound, saw a sign at the variety store. It said abouthollis.com. And I said to myself, geez, what's that about? No pun intended. And so I went up on their website and started researching it and looking at them. And as near as I could tell, there were a couple of women who founded it. Everything I read struck me as fair, balanced, accurate. It just went on with a whole bunch of virtues. I just shot them a quick email. Thanks for loving our kids. Thanks for pursuing the truth. Thanks for wanting the highest and best good for our kids. Your dedication, your service. So that's how I got here. Now I'm flipping on to your side and I'm thinking to myself, if I was sitting in your seat, what would I like to hear? And I think one of the problems, or what I would like to hear, is tolerance, respect, dignity. They belong to every individual. Intolerance to their errors. If they're masking things that are not factually correct, they're partial truths, they're erroneous, then we have a duty and a responsibility, because a democracy is an enlightened citizenry, to challenge them every step of the way. And we challenge them with respect, tolerance, and dignity, right? If you think about it, some of the people advocating critical race theory, a lot of people are reluctant to criticize or challenge it because they haven't made that distinction. They think by criticizing the advocacy of the policy of critical race theory that they're impugning or maligning somebody of color or no color, right? The reality is Respect, dignity, and tolerance belongs to the individual. Their errors, their partial truths, whatever their, motivations are, harmful for children, challenge it, test it, check it. And so when it comes to critical race theory, to having Martin Luther King gave his life for the principle that we should be judged by the content of our character, not our color of our skin. Marching in civil rights marches, club beaten, shepherds, biting at him, churches bombed. But he died for a principle. He died for a principle. Critical race theory just turns that on its head, and it goes right off the bat from a common sense standpoint, it's wrong, because even Solzhenitsyn came to the conclusion when he was living behind the Iron Curtain in the Soviet Union, a highly decorated Soviet soldier in World War II that was sent to the gulags because he started to express himself. And he concluded it's not a question of finding out who the good guys are or who the bad guys are, because good and evil runs down the middle of every human heart. So this critical race theory is an attempt to determine who the good guys are, who the bad guys are. It repudiates the finest and best people, true leaders, in principles that we stand for. We're the only country in the history of the world that was founded on a creed. Those principles were up there. Martin Luther King saying, strive, aspire, just like the teachers and all you people are doing, living up to a principle. Good citizens, you want to give your best volunteer service to make Hollis's kids the best education possible, and you're paying the price. Sometimes getting maligned or criticized for it, you're paying the price, the phone calls, God knows when, and you're not making a dime for it. And you got your own families, you got your own kids. So the point is, as far as critical race theory goes, that to me is patently a lie and patently highly damaging. What happened to children, the thing that distinguishes children from adults, is their innocence. Because as adults, we're punting on all these challenging issues, and we're forcing them down to kids, and then we wonder why they're struggling to have it. They're being asked to deal with adult issues that they're not equipped to, and we're robbing them of their innocence. The only thing I've learned in life is if you deny a child their youth and their innocence and their joy and all the spontaneity, you know what happens? They become adult children. And then they come back and they get and do a lot of damage because they never once had a childhood that was innocent and so forth. So let's protect the innocence of our kids. I got no dog in this fight. I don't even know the people in about Hollis. I don't know one person who they are. But what it struck me was, as far as getting this back to school on the medical evidence, you got Kulsdorf out of Harvard, Bakhtiar out of Stanford, Oxford, Yale, all these brilliant people, and it's like, how come they're not being heard? It's freedom of speech. How come these people being censored? Robert Redfield, the deputy, whatever he was, of the CDC, just came out a couple weeks ago and said, because he said that the virus came out of the lab in Wuhan, he was physically threatened by other scientists. So I guess we need to buy a little bit more time on all the fear-mongering and the panic, and the only way we can get off the fear is, by the way, false evidence appearing real. When you read these people, Kulsdorf and Bakhtiar and everybody else, they've got their reputations, their expertise on the line. Back to you. If I were you, I'd do two things. Lincoln said, as a public servant, his purpose was to reflect the will of his constituents. When he could determine what their will was, he would reflect it. If he could not determine what it was, he would do the next best thing to effectuate their will, using his own judgment. You can see a lot of people here committed and everything else to the about Hollis thing, and I don't know anybody, but the fairness, the issues that they pointed out. So if I'm you, I'm saying, okay, state law just, banned critical race theory. That's defensible for me, morally, legally, and every other way. And then the last thing is, some individual once said that, any expert, no matter, 800s in their SATs and all brilliant, and thank God for them, right? They create all the stuff and everything, being someone who barely got out of high school, I appreciate the people with the talent and the brains. But the point is that, no matter how bright you are, you might have 1% of the body of knowledge required to make a wise decision. All these people, you can't beat them. If the majority comes out with all the respective things, so if I'm on I'm saying to myself, Lincoln's principle, I'm adhering to the wisdom of the majority. Anyway, thank you very much, and thanks for your service.
Hi, I'm Sue Hamola, Mendelson Drive. I actually just had a quick question. I appreciate that you clarified, the mission of the school board is oversight of curriculum. And we've also heard about the ABAR program tonight. And the question I actually have is just simply, who actually has oversight of these teachers' trainings that are offered on school time, which gives the impression that it's a school-sanctioned activity. And I just wonder where that authorization comes from, who has oversight to it, and if there's any funding mechanism of it, and if that, who approves that. I'm just wondering.
Sue,
yes.
Can I interrupt you 2 seconds?
Yes, ma'am.
I think your question is extremely valid. And what I would like to do is ensure everyone who wants to speak speaks, and then let us have a discussion that's outside of public comment where the superintendent, et cetera, discuss that very thing.
Oh, absolutely. I just want to ask the question. I'm not waiting for the answer.
I appreciate very much your forbearance if we just delay it until everybody's spoken.
That's all I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Joe Garuba, 28 Winchester Drive. I want to thank you for letting us have the opportunity to speak. I know you've let us run over time, so that's certainly to your credit. And I'll pass in most of my comments by email, but I do want to say this one thing about the reopening plan. So specifically, schools have been closed for a half a day on Friday, and in essence, that has robbed our children of 10% of their education over the last year. It's not acceptable. Children can't be expected to compete with others who receive the entirety of their education. Children pre-pandemic, right? The justification for this was based on the fear of the unknown, and that was certainly reasonable back early in the pandemic. But now that we know that COVID-19 is not a risk for children, and the vaccine is available for others, providing anything less than full 5-day school week with full days would be a grave injustice to my children, who unfortunately haven't had the benefit of a full year's of education as the older children before the pandemic had. So I'm asking that the school board please stand up and fight for our students and make sure they get the education that they deserve. And I'm going to pass in the rest of my comments on the reopening plan.
Much appreciated, Joe. Thank you. And then, 2 seconds. After this, all right, 2 speakers more, and then we've got a ton of work to do. So after these folks are done, we're going to close public comment, okay? Thank you so much. John, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you for giving me another option. I tried to limit my comments earlier to this first topic.
You can see why I was being a little bit difficult here. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to talk about the mask mandate. So we've heard a lot of people come up here and provide evidence for one scientific study or another, evidence that scientific studies are reversed. We really don't know enough about what's going on, but I do know that there are psychological impacts that have happened to my children. I'm the father of 2 adolescent girls, and previously I've come to meetings and tried to point out the risks and the dangers that it's proposing to children's mental health. There has been a documented significant increase in the number of attempted suicides, particularly among adolescent girls. So I'm not here to weigh the benefits and drawbacks or risks of a vaccine or not vaccine or masks for anyone else, because that's their own business. They have to make those judgments themselves. But I know that I have to weigh the impacts to my children that I see, and I see them generally hesitant to reach out to other children and make new friends. Like, I don't know them, I can't speak to them. And that's a direct result of being isolated in school, not allowed to move from table to table, not being able to go to lockers, not interacting on a normal basis that students before them have. And it should be left up to the parents and the children to make that decision, because there's mental health impacts, and nobody else can make those judgments for my children and me. So please don't enforce a mask mandate. It's very important. Thank you.
Hi, Morin Masterson, Milton Place, 60 Milton Place. I just wanted to give you guys sincere thank you for everything that you've done so far in 2020 and so far in 2021. I think you guys have done a marvelous job educating our kids, keeping them safe, following the science, and doing the right thing. I keep telling my friends and coworkers how lucky we are to have had the option of having our kids in school or remote full time. It's really unusual, and didn't come across very many people who had that option. So I think you guys did a great thing and had a lot of moral courage and great executive leadership early on, and you did a markup job. And I hope you continue to follow that compass that so far has led you to make those great decisions. My kids are in this school district, and they are entering 2nd and 5th grade. I support the training that you're allowing your teachers to have. I think that it is good professional development for them. I hear you, it's not creeping into a lower level curriculum and brainwashing or indoctrinating our children. I get that. I hear you, I understand what's going on, and I want to thank you for your support of the teachers to make them more well-rounded, and make them better teachers, perhaps for this district or for other districts that they're going to serve. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I haven't seen you all in a long time. Haven't been on to one of these meetings for a couple of years because.
Wait, Michelle, I need you to.
Yep,
to
Michelle
identify
St. John.
yourself for the record.
Michelle St. John, 29 Orchard Drive here in Hollis. I'm here tonight because I just wanted to lend my support to all of you and say that I've been impressed with everything that the Hollis School Board and the Hollis School District has accomplished over the course of the last year. I know it's been a difficult task to meet everybody's needs throughout the pandemic, and you've all, the teachers, the staff, everything that I've heard from parents, friends of mine with parents with younger children. My youngest is now just 2 years out of this district, and you all have done really an incredible job focusing on the needs of all students, and I want to reiterate that, all students, students who have diverse needs, students who might be questioning their identity, students who might have learning disabilities, students of different colors, of different races, of different religions, all of that, and I'm just very much impressed. I know that Hollis is not as diverse from the community that my family came from, and I do hope that this district continues to move forward in a welcoming environment for all students. One other just quick comment I just want to make that's on the agenda is I see that you're talking about and entertaining interviews for the SRO hire. I was at the Hollis town meeting where that was discussed, and I'm happy to hear that that's moving forward, and I would just strongly encourage a diversity hire in that role and someone that really has a background and also to deal with mental health needs. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your comments. I'm going to assure you again, every one of your comments is taken seriously, and your contributions to this community business of making these schools and making our town is very real, very much respected, and very much taken into account, okay? We have to move on with our agenda for tonight. Again, none of the main topics you all touched on are going to be decided on at all this evening. Much of this work is ongoing. And I just want to remind you of something that took me a long time to learn, because I tend to be like most of you seem to be, which is I tend to be a guardian angel type. Let's say we do something you don't really think is ideal. Anything. We decide to meet on Tuesdays and you think it should be Wednesdays, okay? There's time to learn and change. So keep thinking with us, keep bringing your comments forward, keep working with us, but please respect the fact that, number one, we're doing everything we can with a huge amount of information and a very wide constituency to that we're obligated to. And number two, when things don't work quite right, there are plenty of avenues for addressing them, adjusting them, shifting them, okay? Just as a matter of mutual respect, that's all. Thank you so much. On to the rest of the agenda. I want to point out that I promised Susan Homola that we would sort of more discuss the very question that she asked, which is something that we've touched on earlier as we planned for the agenda. We have the principal's report, we have the items on our discussion, but I would like to talk also about how our school district functions with respect to expressions of concern around teacher performance, or a resource, say a book or a video, or complaints from an individual, be it a student or an employee or a member of the community. I think it's really important that everyone understand and see the number of policies we have and procedures we have, the layers of approvals and authorities that we have in place, and the circle closes around the relationship between the board and the superintendent. So one of the things I asked in preparation for this evening is for our board member Brooke Arthur, who is the chair of the policy committee this year, to just reference the policies we have that outline steps parents and community members can take to address concerns that they have. This is a first step. You're a parent, you're a community member who's heard something, and you're unhappy with it. We have policies for that. And Brooke, if you could speak to the policy names and just their titles and just a brief summary of what they contain.
You'd like me to do that at this time?
If you don't mind.
Okay.
Quickly.
So policy KE is entitled Public Complaints, and that's just referencing that individual complaints can usually be resolved most effectively by parties directly concerned. So there's a chain of resolution process. So, going through the teacher first and then escalating to the principal, perhaps if need be, and then the superintendent, and then finally it might come before us if adequate resolution isn't met. And then KEB is similar. That's public complaints about school personnel. And the slight thing different in this is that if a complaint does come to us, then we will be referring that back to the superintendent, who will let the personnel know of the complaint and work towards a resolution, and then that will be brought back to us. What action that. There's also one for reconsideration of instructional materials, KEC. These are all available on our website. The policies are all listed there. And then finally, KED is specifically public concerns or complaints about facilities and services. And then there's a grievance complaint form that you can find just below that, which is KEDR, that is the grievance procedure for alleged discrimination grievance complaint form that can be filled out for any of those things if the other channels have already been
The other person
exhausted.
I'd like to ask a question of is Gina Bergskog, our assistant superintendent, whose responsibilities tend to cover curriculum and faculty, the guts of our operations. Gina, if you could speak to the material in the handbook, how parents, as a school parent here, I sign every year on the student handbook. Could you describe just briefly, very briefly, how the student handbook works with respect to giving parents guidelines for how to approach the district with concerns?
If you don't have, I was just reading through it recently. So these policies
Gina
are.
can quote these things off the top of her
Yeah,
head.
yes, I know.
No, I'm just not sure exactly what you're asking me to state.
Well, for
So
example,
there's a
the
student
handbook has the whole bullying section, and it has all kinds of references to policies and to procedures and to individuals in the building. So I thought if you could just summarize that super quick.
So coming up shortly is the school registration that we have to complete every summer, and that updates all your information. And one of those pieces is signing off on the student handbook, and there's a direct link in that registration. And in that handbook, it tells you everything from whether or not students can have a cell phone to if there's a concern about materials in the classroom, who to contact for various items. There are some policies that are just a part of the handbook, and then other policies are referenced, but all of our policies are listed, as Brooke already mentioned, on our website, and organized by the subject matter. But our handbook is also posted on the individual school websites. At this point, I'm not sure if the new one has been updated on the website because it's currently being finalized for the registration that's coming up. I believe that email will come out to parents on July 30th.
You can also, can I just add that you can keyword search which is helpful in the policies if you're trying to look for something and you're not sure where you're going to find it, because there's a lot of policies. At the top right side, you can search for keywords and hopefully find what you're looking for.
So every parent is given a digital copy. It's a lot of pages, and the students and the parents have to sign. Digitally sign. So there's access. We send each parent, each family, everything that we can think of that they would need to thrive in our buildings and even to complain about us. I just want to make that clear, that the information for how to escalate your concerns, be it about a book or an individual employee, whether it's a custodian, whether it's a superintendent, anyone else on the plane of our employees. To us, you just come to the microphone and yell. But, we don't get any special treatment. But we do have these very serious, with respect to employees who are in the district and who have a concern about content, another employee, et cetera. Andy, could you just very briefly summarize, generally speaking, to answer the Representative Homola's question, the opportunities, the processes that employees have for addressing their concerns with one another or with content or materials?
Okay. Obviously, any employee who's having a difficulty with another employee would go to their direct supervisor, and they would provide them the information. That supervisor would address that issue, and it may or may not escalate to my level. Obviously, as an organization with 500 staff members approximately, that does happen, and we do address it when it comes to our attention. In terms of professional development, there is a set process. There are two, what I'll call channels. As a educational professional with a license, you have to maintain your certification hours. So you're obligated to participate in professional development. Some of that is provided by the SAU. When we provide it, we don't tend to approve requests for staff because it's going to happen on campus. But many of the other opportunities, in order to achieve your recertification, you sit down with your building principal, you develop a goals plan that is in conjunction with the school district's master plan, which is filed with the state. And then your principal has to approve your professional development, and that comes over to Gina's office, and she then approves it from a financial end, from the PD piece. Even if it's a non-cost piece, it still goes through the professional development portal because we're required to maintain the hours for that recertification. And then every 3 years you recertify. I'll just use myself as an example. I need to recertify as a superintendent, as a principal, and as a business educator. So that requires substantial hours over the 3 years in a variety of different things. As a superintendent and principal, it's pretty easy to get those hours in because many of those I can apply to one or the other. It's often difficult to provide or find programs for myself for my business education certification just because it's not as common as history, English. But everything goes through a process. What we typically do is we will present in September, October, a series of goals for the buildings and for the SAU, and then everything lines up with that. This is the only year since I've been here that we haven't done that, and that was just COVID related. The goal was just really to reopen and get kids in the building. We have our administrative retreat coming up on the 16th and 17th of August. Please don't take the term retreat and think we're going off to some glamorous place. We typically go to the middle school because their library has air conditioning. And we get Panera lunches in the boxes because, as you know, you can only get a box lunch delivered now. But what we do there is we really take the time to hash out our goals as a SAU, and that filters down to each building, and we present those to the boards. And that'll happen again this year. Where did those goals come from? They come from our strategic plan, which I am in the process of updating. But between COVID and masks and DEI and all the other things that go into the job, that's probably the one thing I'm a little bit behind on. So when you heard reference to the 5-year plan, that's what it's talking about. We live off the strategic plan, and we try to budget off the strategic plan so there's no big surprises for the taxpayers in a particular year. That information all comes out. We do regular presentations. We have public input every month, and people are always welcome to come. And while I have the mic, I want to personally thank everybody who came tonight, because what I'm most impressed with as an educator is the ability to have the discussion we had, because we sent a tremendous example for our children of how to approach difficult topics. And that's been the case for my tenure here, and I have a wealth of material that's going to help direct me and guide me, whether it's the reopening plan or DEI or those elements as we move forward.
Thank you, Andy. So the other step you should know that closes the circle on these processes is, for example, when Andy talks about expenditures, every 2 weeks, the business office processes checks, whether they're payroll or invoices for other expenses. The law requires that every school board send appoint 2 members to sign what's called the check manifest, which is basically the check register, where everything's, and the manifest is required to have all of the documentation for each expense. So if it's simply, let's say, the electric bill, that's typically 2 or 3 pages. These professional development courses tend to have 10 pages because the district has a software where the employees, again, including the custodians, the secretaries, the nurses, all of our staff, our employees have contractual rights to take professional development as part of maintaining their certification and continuing education. We want them to be smarter and smarter, and the state requires them to continually update their knowledge for their certifications. So they load the information into this software that captures the name of the course, the source of the course, the cost of the course, the rationale that this individual employee has for wanting to take that course. Sometimes it's a 1-hour Zoom seminar, sometimes it's a 2-day thing somewhere in Manchester or wherever. And the layers of approval can be just 2 people, the principal and the assistant superintendent. It could be more people depending on the specialty of the individual employee. And I know for a fact that sometimes they're turned down. It is not a rubber stamp process. The 2 members, I think who I've already forgotten. I think Amy and Brooke, no, Carol and Brooke this year are signing the manifest. I spent years and years being the manifest signer. It's a big job because you get a stack like this of all the documentation, and you see every single invoice and every single expenditure every 2 weeks, year in and year out, for so long as you're the assigned signer. And it's just a task distribution that we pick among ourselves who's going to do it. The circle closes on not just the cost, the check, the amount, not just the vendor's name, but any information that the employee has respecting what the program is, what it certifies, what it promises to teach, and what its purpose is for that employee. And so that circle closes. Also, in that respect, board oversight. Each board on each district does this exact thing. And I'm telling you, it's a big job because I've seen stacks like that.
Madam Chair, I'd like to just add a little clarity to that as well. In terms of funding, this board owns the funds. Right. We fund everything. The budget is ours. We raise and appropriate every year. Any funds that run through and get spent are documented and run between somebody's eyes here. Right. The only other source of funding is grants. Grants have to come before this board in public, and we have to approve them in public, so you know what monies we're accepting. Those monies go under our management and oversight. There is no other sources of funding coming from organizations unknown or anything like that. It has to be done in public, in front of at least giving the opportunity for the community to see, and you can read our meeting minutes of what we're accepting from a standpoint of grants. Everything else is raised and appropriated through our budgets and is spent and oversaw by us.
In addition,
That's it.
every meeting is live streamed, and those live streams are all archived. You don't have to just take it from the minutes. Yeah.
I was going to say, I apologize if my question was misunderstood. Because I appreciate the extra time, I know everyone's been here. All I was really wondering was, who approved the ABAR program? Who has oversight of what gets taught to teachers, and is it being paid for? And so
Well, you're hearing, actually,
the answer is yes. You guys approved it. You guys have oversight, and you guys have funded it. This is the short answer.
the short answer is yes, definitely.
Yes.
Taxpayer-funded approval process that goes, recommendations from the staff, the board is apprised of the materials, and the board approves or disapproves or asks further questions. The short answer, definitely. But I feel like the short answer often gets, excuse me, hello, this is our meeting. I just want to make it very clear that we have, I'll stop because we have tons more to do, and I appreciate your appreciation for that. I want to make it clear that I could go on and on. There are many, many, many layers of eyes, and all those eyes on everything. All those eyes help us keep the system healthy and honest and transparent. The last thing is, one of the speakers, I'm sorry, I forgot who, asked for transparency on our processes. We had a workshop about this DEI document that's in our packet tonight. No one came. It was public. There was no public comment because we needed to work on it, but it was here for 2 hours, and it was publicly promoted, and no one came, which is fine, but it's not an absence of transparency. You can, however, hindsight, go look at the archive video or the minutes from that meeting if you're interested in hearing what we said or what we didn't say. On that point, we have to move on with our discussion. I appreciate that you feel that your question's been answered. Thank you so much for helping us, helping me shut up, because I'll go on and on, because I love this nerdy stuff. On our principals report, that is next.
Yeah, just a couple pieces. As I made the board aware of, kindergarten enrollment has gone up. So Paula is planning to hire that teacher, and we do have the space, so that will be moving forward. I also wanted to let the board know that Chief Hubert finished his procedures and interview processes. It ended with the chief and I interviewing the 2 final candidates, and Adam Kushmerek, and I apologize, Adam, if I said that wrong, has been selected and will be joining us for new teacher training and becoming a part of the Hollis School District, working with the chief. I'd like to thank him. As some of you may know or may not know, the chief involved school board members. Carol Roy was our representative. Paula Ispicki, one of our principals, was on the committee. So it was a very rigorous process, and I'd like to also thank all the officers who put in for the position. I will tell you, it's a very difficult choice, and I'm glad it was Joe's and not mine. So Adam will be coming on board. That's really the biggest pieces. We are finalizing, or in the final steps of trying to secure a curriculum coordinator, and hope to have more information for you on that at our next meeting. And that's it for the principal's report.
Andy, just a question.
Sure.
Looks like we're a net, I don't know, looks like 12 or 15 students down this year from 2021. At least what's in the current report, it says, 605? And I think, to my calculation, we were at 619 last 2021. Do we anticipate seeing more registrations as we move into the fall?
We
Is
do.
that customary?
Yeah, I mean, part of the issue we're facing right now is just working with the families on the registrations, because as you know, Hughes has more physical availability to get in the building than HPS with the construction right now. But I was there today during construction period, and we had a mom registering her children today. So I do expect this to all sort out and probably be about the same enrollment, just a little difference in what grades it's going to impact.
So if I'm not mistaken, we took an action probably in May or June that allows you to hire as necessary.
Correct.
Without convening the board. Correct. Because if we see these spikes in registrations, that we can address them.
Right, and it really, the big issue was the kindergarten, because if you look right now at 18, 19, 19, 19, we're above specs for kindergarten.
Right.
And we have, I think Paula told me, 4 more still to come. So that's why the teachers being added there. And it really kind of supports the NESDAQ data, which is anticipating a enrollment growth for both towns. And it's really interesting, both Hollis and Brookline right now are about 80 kindergarten students. And that is probably in the area of 20 or 30 bodies more than, say, 5 years ago.
Yeah. And we see a lot of building going on and new families moving in. So that.
Correct.
We see that translate into registrations, right?
And the other shift that's happening is we're seeing the oldest child in the family be an HBS student, where during my early tenure here, the older children tended to be middle school or high school and maybe younger siblings. So it is definitely families coming in, and I would say coming in for the long haul.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about that kindergarten classroom. Is there adequate spacing, like the actual classroom space at HPS that can handle additional?
We will shift things around. If ultimately enrollment kept growing and we had more spaces, we would have to secure like the Library Media Center, which is presently 3 traditional classrooms, is one space. We would have to take that back.
Okay.
So we do have rooms to expand, but our numbers are getting tighter.
Because we had 5 kindergarten teachers, what was it, 2 years ago?
Yep.
There was a class, 5 classrooms, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, the next item on discussion is H-Smart, our big project down at the primary school and up here, but it's primarily at the primary school.
Madam Chair, would you want me to answer Board Member Mann's question about the bathrooms here?
Yeah, so,
do it.
yeah, we that was the
So those who don't
impetus
know,
of this
the
meeting
SAU
a month
Literally
ago.
the one reason we're going to
That was the one item, but so, just to prime the pump here, if I may, we had a conversation in our last meeting to discuss improvements on the SAU building as we own it. This entity owns the building and operates it and charges rent to the other districts to maintain it. And we are going through capital improvements of that property, and there was a desire from this board to see if there's any improvements with the bathrooms and things like that that we can price out and see if that's a project that we want to pursue prior to the start, well, preferably prior to the start of school, but I don't know.
17 people in 2 1950s bathrooms, one of which has a bathtub in it.
Right. So I have spoken to Kelly, and we are on pace when the contractor becomes available to start work on the tub and fixing that issue and creating a hallway so you're not going to an office to get to another office. There were 2 pieces that came up why we would not recommend doing other work at this time. One is contractor availability is slim to none, and as a result of that being the case, you see cost escalation. So I think we could get it done, but I don't think it's worth paying the price, when I think if we just continue on, we'll see those costs come down or contractor availability increase, which will help the cost come down. So
Is that something that we could add to the capital improvement plan of the property and plan it over?
We could absolutely. The thought that Kelly had was that we would again review this in the September-October timeframe, because we can always move forward provided we come back and have a public hearing to use the maintenance trust. And if we see the cost, I'll say just kind of plateau or maybe stabilize would be a better word, and then we could secure a contractor and move forward.
Okay.
But it's just, I think as everybody's experiencing, labor shortages are everywhere, so it just doesn't make financial sense.
Okay.
In the first floor bathroom, went through a renovation, I think when I arrived 7 years ago, so it's much better than the second floor bathroom.
So this evening, there's no action that you're seeking from the board for expenditure on any of those items?
No, so we'll come back
Okay.
with a separate public hearing and move forward if the cost change.
Okay, thank you.
Now to move over to the HMOD building project update. I'm pleased to report that things are going well. If any of the board members are interested and would like to take a tour, if you want to send me an email, I'm happy to walk you through so I can point out some of the highlights. So if you get questions like from the budget committee or whatever, you are most welcome, and we can work around people's schedules. We are presently have installed, I would say, 95% of the sprinkler system. So that will be finalized. And what I mean by the sprinkler system is all the piping has been put in the ceilings, in the kitchens, and the actual sprinkler heads are being installed.
Yes, fire suppression, not irrigation of the lawn.
Correct.
People heard sprinkler system and they thought we were going for green.
No.
So just being clear.
No, thank you very much. I hadn't even started that. So I do appreciate that. As you also know, we are changing from our current fire alarm system to a modern one. Our system was probably somewhere in the range to 20 to 30 years old. So that's being done. That is a complex issue because during the whole time of construction, we have to be functioning off the old system while the new system is installed, and we really have to make that shift on the same day, so we're not ever without a fire alarm system, and that goes well. Our boilers that had asbestos inside them have been removed and taken off property. We have removed our 2 oil tanks. Both of those came out of the ground looking very good. We haven't got the final test back, but that was a concern because of their age, but they came out good. Today we put in the bollards that will go around the new propane tanks for safety. So those were all installed. They will be bringing a crane in to put the platform in for the propane tanks. The digging and installation of the tank has been done. So the 15,000 gallon tank that will support the fire suppression system is in. You'll see that when you're driving out to your left. That area will again be manicured and groomed when we're done. And we did not lose our outdoor classroom. And we're actually going to investigate potential ways of now with this area relatively cleared, can we expand that outdoor classroom? Because again, what we found during COVID was how valued that was and how much students appreciated using it.
Question on that?
Oh, yeah.
On the work that's happening over here, is there a need for any lighting or security or fencing around that installation for the obvious reasons?
Right, what will happen is when the project is done, there'll be a gate that's been approved by the fire department and a firebox system that will give the fire department access 24/7 to all those facilities. So it will be secured. And once it's done, we may look at, planting some of our own trees, in terms of shrubs and that, to make it a little more pleasing to the eye.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But there's still a wealth of digging of the pipes. Like today, they cut the cement to the back of the building that will take the propane lines to the new boilers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And once that's complete, they'll dig the trenches for the actual connection between the cistern with the 15,000 gallons and the fire suppression system in the building. But it goes well. You know, if you went in now, it looks like chaos. You know, every ceiling is open because you've got all your wiring exposed, all those upgrades. But I want to commend Ekman Construction, who's our lead person that works with us, and all their subcontractors have been doing a great job. But again, it's hard to kind of give you the visual, so if you'd like to come in, you're almost welcome, and we'll work around your schedule. If it's okay with the board, I'll go to the COVID protocols. In your board packet tonight, you have what I'll call a scaled down, approximately 7-page document that we were required to file with the state of New Hampshire for our ESSER funding. So it is a bare bones skeleton reopening plan. We are in the process of finalizing the reopening plan that we constructed last year that is more in the range of 60 to 70 pages. We are coming back as normal as possible, so we will be back in school on Fridays. We may come to the board for sometime during the first quarter or semester or something, and may request an early release day, giving parents ample notice so that we can reflect back on the curriculum. Under Gina's leadership, we've done yeoman's work this summer. We've spent plenty of time focusing on our academics in terms of what we were able to cover, what we have maybe concerns that were gaps, and that information will be passed on by grade level to teachers. But at some point, we're going to want to, have some time for those teachers to discuss that. But at the same time, we didn't want to put them on the calendar etched in stone because we'd like it to be somewhat flexible. But it's not going to be we're coming to the board on a Tuesday asking to be out on a Friday or the following Monday or whatever day. There'll be ample notice so that we can take care of those. The biggest issue, as you heard tonight, that we're discussing is masks. I will be participating along with other administrators in a Department of Health and Human Services call tomorrow. I understand the recommendations that came from the CDC, but the CDC is a national organization. We made the decision as a district last year to follow Health and Human Services for the state of New Hampshire and Dr. Chan, and I will say he did an excellent job, and by listening to him, we were able to do this, so we really want to hear his thoughts. I respect all the comments from both sides tonight. I don't think I'll make a decision until August because it also gives me 30 more days. And in COVID, what I learned, a week can mean a big deal. I do intend, or one of our administrators will ask the question, how are we going to deal with the issue if we were to see excessive heat in the fall, just like we saw excessive heat in the spring, and the masks? I have concerns about that. Little children don't always remember to drink water, things like that. So we have our work to do. I will absolutely make a recommendation. I'm not saying it will be popular either way, but it'll be to open schools and to keep kids in 5 days a week as much as possible. So that's kind of the COVID update. I'd gladly try to answer any questions, but we'll know a lot more after tomorrow's call.
For sure. So you just mentioned the possible expanded outdoor classroom, which is awesome, and that's a permanent fixture. Are there any plans right now to bring back the tents? I know we specifically had them to allow for kids to be outside during the COVID, situation with masks last year. I've heard great response from folks about just the kids being able to be outside more, and just for the purpose of the fresh air, change of scenery, learning ability outside. What is the thought process on that?
So specifically the tents, there's no plan right now to bring them back. However, we found that teachers were taking students outside and not going under the tents, going to other spaces. And so one really important critical activity that our teachers in both of our schools here in Hollis engaged in at the end of the year is, what are we going to keep? What was a keeper just because of COVID? And absolutely one of the favorites was going outside. And I can remember in one of our other districts just walking outside a third grade classroom and seeing students reading, lying on a beach towel, and just doing what they would have done at their desk, but just outside, enjoying the fresh air, enjoying a little bit more space. And that's absolutely going to be encouraged. And I think all the teachers really enjoyed that as well.
Awesome. Great to hear.
I would say the feedback is enough that you may see some requests to do what I'll call more of a permanent structure.
Yeah.
You know,
Like a
more
pavilion
like
or something.
I'll call it a pavilion.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Because the other piece that we saw, it'd be very, very positive, and again, in all our districts, was lunches. You know, to get out and to have a lunch and to get their food and to, you know, I think we learned so much about, you know, things that we know, but saw it in action, you know, how to de-stress. And just simply changing environments and being outside. And yes, granted, it was on a 5-gallon bucket from Home Depot that kid was sitting on, but you could see it. So, you know, so we have some areas on our property that could lend themselves to outdoor classrooms. I don't think it would be that expensive from a budget standpoint, and I think it would pay long-term dividends that would benefit children.
I'd be very interested in hearing some options and recommendations about that.
Yep.
Yes, please.
Same.
Any other questions on our COVID protocols?
Have you considered, will you be, I feel like there was a questionnaire that went out to families last year as the decisions were having to be made. Is there any consideration of that, telling families about how, you know, in terms of, like, for instance, what was brought up a little bit from some people saying, I think there was a doctor saying, considering masked classrooms and unmasked classrooms.
Well, personally, I struggle with that concept.
Okay.
Because I have no business knowing if you're vaccinated or not. You know, I mean, that to me is almost what we saw dealt with the exit of prom, because we mocked hands and didn't mock hands. So as much as I understand what they're coming from the medical side of it, we have a certain obligation, and to have a whole class identified that they are vaccinated or not vaccinated.
No, but I said masked.
Right. In terms of the masks, you're going to have lunch, you're going to have the hallways. So, I mean, it sounds like a nice concept, but the reality of what school looks like if we go back to normal school, not so much at the primary school, but you've got kids going to lockers here and all of those pieces. And that's really important to get back. I mean, school is your locker, you know, and hanging out with your friends at your locker and those pieces. I think ultimately, as much as it will be difficult and we won't make everybody happy, we're going to head into a very good school year, knowing that we have a plan from last year that allows us to tighten up when we need to tighten up. And we're going to be talking with Health and Human Services on how do we figure out when we can loosen up. You know, like I'm going to start the year outside with no masks. If, you know, quarantine came back and different things like that impacted us last year, I would go back to potentially looking at masks again. We've taken steps with families that have multiple children and told them to start the year with putting them in the same classroom, you know, right now when we're doing schedules. And as we learn more, you know, I've got a set of twins, you've got a set of twins. If we, you know, neither one of us want our twins to be together. So if I put 2 in Gina's room and 2 in Tammy's room, and then we find out that there's more flexibility, we'll just move one twin each. So we don't increase the numbers for the teacher-to-student ratio. So our principals are doing all this planning. We're looking at recess in cohorts again to start. Because one of the frustrations we saw last year is when we called for guidance, it depended on who you got. And once guidance is given to you by Health and Human Services, I really can't say I don't want to follow that or I do want to follow that. I need to follow that. So that's why, you know, around quarantining and things, we made some changes once we realized what we were going to get back. So July 19th, I think it is, 18th, I'm not sure the date, You know, I feel very comfortable where we're at. We're having a tremendous summer. We are optional masks for ESY. We've had kids in the whole summer, and we've had no cases, knock on wood, to date. You know, so, but it's not going to be easy, and I respect both views. I mean, I feel kind of lucky because my children aren't in this piece because I don't know where I'd fall as a parent. I see both sides.
I think we have to emphasize what Andy's already said, which is, you know, last August, we opened with no masks at recess. Case popped up, masks at recess. We've been very agile, very nimble. The plan that was put together last year was like a Rubik's Cube. And, you know, it got turned and twisted as the needs arose. And if we found the planning in these important agencies' guidances.
Right, and what I'm going to ask for, whatever plan we adopt and wherever we go with masks, I'm just going to ask the board for permission again to adjust on the fly, because I don't want to have to call a board meeting, you know, every 6 or 7 days if it went south and things were bad. So, you know, we'll make the final decision. Obviously, you as a board on masks will make that, but then it's just more basing it on data. And I will do what I did last year, provide you regular updates, just so you know kind of where we're heading.
Are we anticipating, I know we are operating under an MOA with the teachers union this year. Are we anticipating anything like that from them going forward?
We are not. We have been in, I'll say, regular contact to the end of the school year. I've corresponded with a couple of our union presidents. I mean, our teachers are vaccinated. They obviously can wear masks if they would like. I don't really see any issues going back to a full day on Friday. I do know that they had talked to me a little bit about it, but from an educational standpoint, I really need to gain those hours back twofold. One, so we don't fall further behind, and anywhere possible that we can catch up on anything that we might have fell behind. So I don't anticipate that, but I will be reaching out to them, as I always do, probably once we get to early August, and I'll keep the board updated. In terms of the, if it's okay to move on?
Please.
I didn't really intend to spend a lot of time on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I wanted to have the feedback because I had received, like many of you, emails from about Hollis. As I've told you, I've also received many emails from parents who aren't associated with that website expressing their own views. And the two primary things that I've dealt with recently are, no surprise, it's masks and it's DEI and CRT. Okay? What I'd like to do with the board is, we heard some wonderful pieces from people tonight. I know most of them, and they will follow up with their feedback. So I'd love to get that and bring that back to the board with any other adjustments, because as I've said, you know, I'd rather get this right than rush this.
Absolutely.
Number one. And number two, I know there were concerns about professional development training. I've addressed that. And once my teachers come back, we'll be having training on what the new law means under House Bill 2. The administration will get training on that during our administrative retreat. And I think that could also play into our DEI statement. So I'd like to go through that legal training for Gina, myself, and the administration, and see if that impacts anything that we have in our DEI statement, because I think that's very important, because part of our responsibility is also making sure we're not unintentionally exposing the district to a lawsuit.
Well, I don't care about lawsuits personally if we're in the right. I care about not having specious suits thrown at us. And I also care that we don't earn a lawsuit because we've done something wrong. If we've done something right, let them sue us. I want to talk a little bit about a comment you made. So much was said tonight about this DEI, you know, tonight, and has been also so far. What was it you just said? So this discussion item says that diversity, equity, and inclusion follow-up from school board workshop. Was that just how you phrased it, or was there something specific from the workshop?
No, that was how I phrased it, because
Okay.
the last time we got together is in the workshop, and if you were to look at the
That's fine.
the co-op board packet, who will see it tomorrow night, in the upper left, I've put all the different dates, because not each board has had the same bites at the apple for this.
Right.
And the co-op is the furthest behind, and that was intentional, because they were the one with the Morin article on their agenda, so they didn't want to proceed with something not knowing how the citizens were going to vote on a warrant article.
So the thing I think needs saying also, not only from DEI, is the fact that we have not received a technical advisory from the Department of Education on the new laws.
That's correct.
We have not received technical guidance from the School Board Association that we belong to that is all attorneys and processes all of this. And we haven't received technical guidance from these the private attorneys that we use who are public school specialists, who also separately are processing all of this.
Right.
So it'll be a little while before, we're in suspended animation around policy development, around a number of things, including even addressing this draft DEI statement, because the new legislation is so onerous and confusing, and we're waiting for even the Department of Ed itself to tell us what it means, because we can't just interpret it how we feel like. We have to work within the confines of the law to the greatest degree possible. And the policy review from Drummond-Woodson goes right into that too, right? It's suspended until they understand how to review our policies.
That's also addressing the larger picture. If you remember, we had talked about using the School Boards Association to do a policy review.
Right.
The School Board Association is about 2 years out.
Right.
Drummond and Woodson believes they'll be able to provide us at least with a paralegal to get us started, because I think with everything going on, it's imperative. So I just want to let you know that we're working with Jim O'Shaughnessy, who is our attorney. We're trying to identify people within Drummond Woodson that can give us the technical expertise, while at the same time approach parts of it from a paralegal standpoint, so that the cost of this to the SAU will come in at a manageable number. If that cost obviously doesn't come in at a manageable number, Gina and I will come back to you and say we're not moving.
Can it be partial?
So I think essentially I sent them our full list of policies, and last time they were updated, and he was going to use that as a framework for identifying focus areas, and then kind of cost out what that would look like for them to review what we have, or look at, do we want to select certain ones based on their priority areas identified, and then just go from there. So try to make it as manageable as possible with giving us appropriate legal advice.
So if we were to go ahead with it, approximately when do you estimate they would be able to get to it, given the new legislative reality?
I'm expecting to hear back any day from them based in terms of a timeline and a cost. New Hampshire School Board Association has also said that while they have us in the docket for next summer, what they were willing to do was look at that same index and highlight important items for us to focus on, and that was free of charge.
Right.
And he apologized for letting that slip through the cracks, because I should have heard from them by now, but he has today reached out to me and said by next week, so we will have direction soon.
Excellent, excellent.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. So in terms of the public input tonight, and our processing it in terms of what we're going to do with DEI, it was referenced that a lot of it was coming from the About Hollis website. And so my question is, how many documented incidences or grievances has the administration, either at your level as superintendent, or if you have the data on it, at the principal level for our district, how many grievances in this realm have come to you, if you're able to say?
Happy to answer that. I checked with Candee the other day just to make sure I didn't misspeak. There were no issues brought to her regarding curriculum at Hughes this year. At the elementary level, I talked to Paula. There was one parent that went to her, and then that parent eventually arrived at my desk as well. The situation was handled. We addressed it internally, dealing with the parent, and when I spoke to the parent this spring, he was very pleased with the education his child was receiving at this point. Just so the board is aware, I have been approached by people from abouthollis.com. My job is to meet and talk and gain information from everybody and anybody. So I continue to dialogue because, again, if there are concerns, I want to become more aware of them. But I do encourage folks to use the channels of going to the classroom teacher, to the building administration, and if they're still not happy, to come to me. If they're not happy with my decision, or Gina's, or Lauren's, to come to the board. And we have people use this process, and whether it ends up in our favor or not, I think it's a very effective process and allows them to vent their concerns.
Yeah.
And document them.
Yes. And I guess I'd like to speak to that what I think is so foundational for every student's learning is their relationship with their teacher. When I reflected on my relationship with my favorite teacher in 5th grade, Mrs. Hubert, it wasn't about any curriculum that I can remember. It was the way that I felt in her classroom, that I felt safe, that I felt respected, that I actually called her mom by accident once because I was so comfortable there. And that's the thing that I want to ensure that we protect, because relationship building is so foundational. And I just need to say that because I think that's what our teachers are striving to do, to know their students well, and that's what we need to preserve for them. So.
Excellent. Madam Chair, we do need a second on public tonight.
Before we close this topic, I want to make it clear that this board has carried out its due diligence on any concerns that have been raised either through dispersed information sources that are out in public facing without names, or through any concerns that have been raised through the proper channels as they should be. We respect the public. The public must also respect the rights of our students, our families, and our employees. And our processes allow us to capture those concerns, to date stamp them, and to capture and document all of the steps and follow through on any concerns that are raised, whether it's mask related or whether it's any of the other myriad issues that can come up. The documentation is the only honorable way to base corrective action where it's needed, or to prove that corrective action is not needed. And it's the only way for an elected board like ours to properly govern over our responsibilities, obligations, the accountability, the transparency people want. If anyone has a concern about any factor in our district, they must go through the proper processes in order that their voices are heard and that justice is achieved for all parties involved. The board closes that circle with its oversight of the staff and the questions it is allowed to ask in the proper settings as dictated by the RSAs that we are a creature of statute, and the statutes tell us what we can and can't do, and we obey them in spirit and in word. and I cannot emphasize enough, we closed the circle with Andy Corey, the superintendent, with Gina, with other senior staff members. We close these circles each and every year whenever there's a concern raised, whether that's visible to the public or whether that information in that step in a process is not allowed to be visible to the public. And that is how we know that whether or not we are confident that information that's being sprayed around town or not is accurate or not, and whether or not it's accurate, whether it has been acted on properly or not. And I, for one, am confident, because of fact gathering, because of information gathering that I'm tasked with by the law, that our administration has properly responded to all of the concerns that have been raised. They can't act on anonymous statements in the public realm, and yet those concerns have been responded to, and we have carried out our oversight of that process, and I'm quite confident. I want to raise my hand as a vote of confidence in how the staff has handled the concerns that have been raised in public. And I would like to ask each of you to just as a matter of sentiment of the board, not as a voter of any kind, if you could each speak to whether or not you feel confident you have had the proper access to staff, the proper access to the information that you feel you need to feel confident in the performance of our administration when concerns are raised. Could I ask that of you? You don't have to. This is a step that Carol, would you like to speak to this?
You're asking us to say whether or not we feel like our access has been proper?
Do you feel that you have the tools that you need? Do you feel that you have the access that you need as a board member to carry out the oversight that should be carried out over the processes that oversee this district and its performance?
I do. The items come to us as part of their own process, but if at any time I wanted to go get answers at any other stage, the door is open, the email is available, they answer the phone. They've never not done that for board members. They've never not done that for members of the public. So I'm satisfied with the access and information that I've been able to get and continue to get.
Thank you so much. Brooke, do you feel that you'd like to speak to this?
I don't need to say anything more. I have confidence in our relationship with the administration. I think okay.
Rob, do you have a sense you'd like
Yeah, I do. I think it's, you know, when we get a big room full of people that come out on their busy schedules to come out in the evening to share their insights and their thoughts on any item, is very valuable to this board to hear their concerns, even some suggestions, and I think we've received a plethora of all that tonight, and it's very valuable. I know that when we hear a lot about items from parents or from groups within the community, we have an opportunity, and in some cases, an obligation to engage the administration and ask questions in the most appropriate way in the right setting. That may be visible to the public. Often, sometimes it's not. But I feel quite convinced that I've received the detail I need to feel comfortable that we have a handle on things. And also, my other concern is to ensure that we have the tools and policies in place, that we don't have gaps in those policies, to be able to continue to address things going forward, whatever they are. I'm convinced that we don't have any gaps, and that we have this body has the ability not only to oversee, but to continue to oversee on items in the future. I believe we've done diligence here, and I'm comfortable where we are right now, and I'm comfortable with the things that we are planning going forward and the steps that we're taking. So there's not going to be something that we're doing tonight like that, right? So this is a process. These are big, big topics we're tackling. And we're trying to do it the best and most transparent way possible. And I invite more people to come and talk to us about this when they feel they would like to.
And stay for the discussion.
Yeah, because this is the part where we get to talk and they get an idea of where we are on all this stuff. But unfortunately, I understand time and evening such as it is. Hopefully, folks will review the tape someday.
Thank you, Rob. Amy?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I have nothing further to add.
Excellent. Thank you so much for all the work you do and for taking on this giant load. So we are now we're going to enter non-public again, so may I have a motion?
We're going to make a motion.
You already made the motion?
No, I was letting you know we have to make the motion.
Yeah. I was just going to invite it.
I'll move that the board go into non-public session pursuant to RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2, A, the dismissal, promotion, or compensation of any public employee, and/or C, to discuss a matter which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of a person other than a member of the body or agency itself.
So moved.
Brief discussion. Do we need both of those, A and C?
I think just keeping it A and C, it's about reputation.
Okay, great, thank you. So all in favor? Sorry, we have to
Carol,
roll
Roy,
call.
aye.
Brooke, aye.
Rob, aye.
Tammy, aye. Ladies and gentlemen, whoever's on camera, anyone in the house, we will not be doing any further business when we end our non-public, so this is functionally end of the meeting so far as the public is concerned.